What's up guys, today I'm going to show you how to fully delete a 2022 and newer 6.7 Cummins. First things first though, if this is illegal where you live, I don't recommend you do it, so make sure you look up your local laws and stay in accordance with them. So the kit we're going to be using is from the Diesel Dudes. I'll put a link down in the description, and this kit comes with a new ECM for an ECM swap. So here we have an exhaust and a muffler, and here, like I said, we have a new ECM. This is an older style ECM. And then you get a Race Me tuner with gauges and everything. Tunes are already preloaded on it, as well as an EGR Delete kit right here. This Race Me tuner also comes with shift on the fly, so you can change, I think, from like 25 horsepower up to 180 horsepower. Now this plug kit doesn't come with the actual delete kit. It's an add-on you can get, but I strongly recommend you do it because all the sensors you unplug, you can cap off with these dummy plugs, and basically that will just keep water and corrosion out of the sensors, which makes it really good if you ever want to put your emissions back on the truck. You can just unplug these and plug everything back in and it will work just fine. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to tune it. You always want to make sure the truck is tuned, and that's all good before you remove any parts off of it. So here are all the components to the tuner, and first we want to grab this unlock cable and we're going to install this. So this cable is going to plug in underneath the hood. You want to take this little weather cap out here, and then that's where you're going to plug the cable, and then you're going to find a place to run it in through the firewall into the cab. I just ran a coat hanger through the firewall here by the steering shaft, and there we got the cable right there. You can grab this cable and plug it into the back of your Race Me tuner. Use the suction cup and mount your tuner up there, and then I usually just pull this weather stripping down, pull this guy out. Then you can stick this cable in and run it down, and plug your unlock cable in here, plug the monitor into here, and then put this OBD cable on. Once that's all plugged in, you can take this cable and actually hook it up into the OBD plug. Now everything should be plugged in. It's up to you to kind of neatly zip tie this up underneath the dash somewhere. When you plug it in, it's going to do some stuff like this. That's totally fine. Just let it go through its process. Turn the key to the run position, but don't start the truck. And then it should look like this. If it doesn't look like this, just tap the screen. It should bring you the menu. We want to go to settings, scroll down until you see something that says service codes. Hit enter, type in 4666 and say enter. And it should say immobilize with data safe for truck. Just verify that the VIN number there is the correct VIN number to your truck and hit exit. And you can turn off the ignition. Now we are ready to swap the ECM. Disconnect your two negative battery terminals. Remove this plastic cover. Remove this crossover pipe. Now you're gonna unplug and remove this EGR valve. Since we're doing an EGR delete, we're just gonna put the blocker plate on now. Use a razor blade to just kind of scrape off these old gaskets. Make sure you put these O-rings in, then secure the new blocker plate on with the new Allen bolts. Now we're gonna remove this whole intake horn, so you have to unplug your map sensor. The throttle valve down here is also plugged in. Once you kind of get this thing moving, you can unplug it a little bit easier, and then take off this bracket. And then there's 6 bolts, including this one, that hold this intake elbow on. There's also a hose clamp here we're gonna remove, and then we'll just pull this whole thing off the truck. Okay, I got her upside down. This is that throttle valve we gotta unplug. These black tabs, you can just break them off like that. And these sensors just push this thing to the right and then pop it through. Once you have it like that, you can push down on here and unplug it. Save this gasket for reinstallation. Look at all that carbon buildup there. I'm gonna try to clean that up and use a shop vac to suck it all up. So again, make sure your batteries are both disconnected. Now we're gonna pull this ECM, which is right down here, out of the truck. So I always unplug this sensor in your injection pump to give you a little more room. And if you look down here, these are your plugs, your connectors for your ECM, and there's 2 bolts on each one. These are 2 8mm bolts, and then there's 2 10mm bolts for that one. Remove those. Once you have these bolts out, we're going to press the little red tab just underneath this bracket. And that gray bracket, you can see there, we're going to push that downwards. And as you push that bracket downwards, it should kind of pull off of the ECM. Sometimes you have to work it back and forth a little bit. Just be very gentle with it, take your time. And we're gonna unplug both those connectors off the ECM. Okay, here's one plug. The other plug is also off as well. But yeah, you have to kind of work this back and forth. And I ended up using a screwdriver at the bottom and very gently pried this off as I was able to go down with the lever. I kind of pried it. Just be very careful with these things. You don't want them to break. Now we're gonna unbolt the ECM from the truck. As you can see on the new ECM, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolt holes, so get those and take them out. So now the ECM is loose in here. I kind of tucked this front plug in against the engine, and then the one at the back, I kind of just moved to the back a little bit. And now what we're gonna wanna do with this ECM is we're actually going to pick it up and we're gonna rotate it 90 degrees so that it's kind of straight up and down like that. The blue plug should be facing upwards. And now you're going to just kind of hold these cables out of the way, and you're going to gently kind of wiggle this ECM and just be very careful with it and pull it out of the truck. There it is. Take your time with it. It's very tight coming out of there. Now you're going to grab your new ECM, put it back in exactly the same way we took it out. You're going to bolt it up, plug it in, and then put these bolts back in. Once the ECM is back in place and hooked up, make sure you have this gasket here, clean that all up nice. And we're gonna put this intake horn back on and then put the bracket that mounts this dipstick on. This throttle valve, leave it unplugged. Don't plug it back in. Plug this in, but leave that unplugged. All right, we got the intake elbow back in. I'm gonna hook up the batteries and then we're gonna tune this thing. Hook a battery charger up and just set it to something around 10 amp. Put the key back to run, go to your tuner, go to ECM, hit right recovery, and then you're just gonna follow the prompts. It's gonna say permanently consume 1 ECM flash, hit yes. Confirm that this is the right VIN number, then hit yes. Okay, it's giving me this error. Let me figure this out. All right, we are writing the recovery file. So it wasn't writing the recovery file, it was giving me an error 14101. So I ended up just unplugging the RaceMe tuner and disconnecting the batteries for about 20 minutes, hooked the batteries back up, plugged the RaceMe tuner back in, and now I'm tuning the truck and it's working fine. Just finishing up here. This is the recovery file. There we go. Programming successfully completed. Sweet. Okay, now that we've written that recovery file, the truck should have factory settings on it. But what we want to do before we write the shift on the fly delete tunes is we want to just start the truck and make sure it runs for more than a few seconds. I'm going to try to start it. Remember, we have that pipe still off in the engine bay, so if it does start, which it should, it's going to sound a little funny, and that's totally normal. We do have an engine light on. That's because we have all that EGR valve and stuff unplugged, which is totally normal. Seems all good to me. Let it run for a few seconds, like 30 seconds, and if it doesn't shut off, then we know we're good. All right, I'm gonna call that good. So now we're gonna turn the key back on, go into ECM tuning again, ECM, program custom file to ECM, and you can see right there, 1 shift on the fly ECM. If you have the 68 RFE, you'll probably see one that says WT, that means with transmission tuning. You'll probably wanna run that one. This one has the ASIN, so there's no transmission tuning for it, but we're gonna hit okay. We're gonna remove the speed limiter. We're gonna type in 250, that's the max it'll let you do. Hit enter, and we're gonna hit program. And you're just gonna follow the prompts again. This one's already tuning, it doesn't even get you to cycle the key. Almost done. Programming has been completed successfully. I'm gonna exit right out of here. Take this battery charger off. Now remember, we still have that open, but we're gonna just start this thing and run it and make sure it's all good. All right. Is my battery really that low? I think my batteries are like really low. Let me put this charger back on. Okay, we are running. It was in fact just my batteries are low. I do see an engine light, which is pretty normal. A lot of times after you tune a truck, you'll get an engine light. We're gonna clear that with the RaceMe tuner. Looks like it pegged our def gauge out at full, that's nice. So with the key in run, engine off, if you go to ECM, DTCs, no DTCs found, I'm just gonna hit exit and try to start it up again. So the truck starts and runs great, and I can tell the tune worked because the def gauge is pegged out at 100%, but we still have that engine light on right there. Typically when you tune these trucks to run emissions off tuning, they'll either peg the def gauge at full or empty. So I know this tune is working, but we got an engine light. And it's currently Monday. It's a holiday here in Saskatchewan, so they're not even open. I can't even call tech support. Okay, so we still have this engine light on. And since it's outside of business hours, I can't call RaceMe Canada and ask them how to fix this. The RaceMe tuner is saying there's no codes, and it doesn't give me any option to clear because there's nothing. So this is like a really cheap scanner, and I'm just gonna try this one. So this is saying there's 1 DTC. Say okay. Erase codes. Okay. Says it's cleared, so let's try it now. Okay, well that's all it took. Now it's cleared. Just gonna set cruise, make sure this works. High idle it. Everything seems fine. This is like a $50 scanner and it cleared that code. So I don't know if you guys are gonna have to do that or not. Usually it doesn't throw an engine light, but this one did, and the RaceMe tuner wasn't able to read the code, so it didn't clear it. But this little guy did, and now we have no issues at all. I'll call them tomorrow when they're open and just ask what to do in that situation. But in this situation, we just use a cheap little Amazon scanner and clear the code, and now we're all good. I also just want to quickly show you how you're going to change the power settings. So say you're in dashboard B and this is, your gauges. If you just kind of tap the screen, it's going to come up with this display. You're going to hit switch right here. And you're going to see all your different files you have here. So you got stock, tow, street, performance, and race. And you can just click one of those while you're driving and it should change the power level for you. Okay, it is now the next day and I just contacted Race Me Canada and I asked them about the engine light. And they said that when you're programming a new ECM like we did, it goes into a learning state and that can trip an engine light. Typically the engine light should go away on its own within 5 or 6 key cycles. The other possibility is that there could be another code stored in another one of these modules on this truck. The Race Me Ultra will only read the ECM. So if we had like a body control module fault, that would trip the ECM light, but the Race Me Ultra wouldn't pick that code up when you scan it. Regardless, the engine light's off, the tune worked, so we are gonna go ahead and we're gonna start with the EGR. Since we already have it half apart anyways, we're just gonna finish removing the EGR and doing that delete. Technically don't have to remove the EGR. If you want, you could put that valve and that crossover pipe back on and leave it so it looks stock. I would just unplug it. But the exhaust you for sure have to do, but we're gonna do the EGR first, we'll do the exhaust second. Okay, so we already have this blocker plate on. This throttle valve, remember, is unplugged. Here's the connector for it. And then this unlock cable, you're gonna make sure you zip tie it up neatly out of the way, but that has to stay plugged in if you're gonna be switching power levels. Going to the passenger side, we're gonna remove this heat shield. Once the heat shield's off, we're gonna remove these 4 bolts. This will come off, and then we're also gonna have to remove, there's a couple 10 mils there and this way, and then these 2 pieces that are connected together here will come off as one. You also have to remove this little heat shield as well. Like that. Unplug this exhaust back pressure sensor and we'll just fold this wiring off to the side. Undo this V-band clamp right here. Now move these 2 15mm nuts. This one's easy to get, that one's a little tricky. I use a 15mm wrench. I bend kind of like a hockey stick. I put it on there, and I actually use a pry bar and I pry it this way, and that's how I loosen it. If it's being really miserable, you can also use like a crowfoot and extension, kind of like that, to loosen it up. Yoink. Make sure you keep this factory gasket on there. Grab the new smaller blocker plate, make sure it's the flat side down. Put the blocker plate down, and tighten it down with the bolts you just removed. But sometimes I find that you actually run out of threads before you tighten this plate down. If that's the case, then you're just gonna have to find some washers like this. Put the washers on and then tighten it down. Once the blocker plate's tightened down, we're going to remove this hose and just tuck it off to the side. And grab a 7mm, undo this bolt, and just pop that sensor off. Now this truck's actually already been snipped here, but what I do is I take some side cutters and I just kind of cut this plastic out so that this hose can pop up. And that way we don't have to remove this whole CCV filter and valve cover off. So if you see what this looks like, it's just kind of been snipped like that and like that. And then it opens all this room up. Just don't damage this actual circle part where the sensor sits. If you don't want to cut that, you can take all these 8 bolts out, pop this whole valve cover off and the CCV and everything, and then that's how you could do it, but it's up to you. But now we're going to take the 4 bolts that hold this EGR cooler down, and then there's 2 big ones at the back. They're 15mm. There you can see one of them right there. Also, any more 10mm bolts that are bolted to the side, like this guy right here, there's one here, just remove all those bolts. A big ratchet really helps getting those back bolts. Some trucks may have studs, these ones have bolts with spacers. And if you have the 68 RFE, you're gonna have a transmission dipstick, so obviously you're gonna wanna unbolt that off this stud and just kind of pop it off to the side. Now, I don't drain the coolant for this. When we pop this pipe off here, we're gonna lose a little bit of coolant, and that's totally fine. So pop off this hose right here. Then we're going to slide the EGR cooler back to remove it from here, and then it'll be totally loose, and then we'll gently kind of maneuver it and pull this whole EGR cooler out, because as you can see right now, the whole thing is loose. And here is the EGR cooler. Make sure you keep that gasket back here, because we're gonna need to use this again. Now there's 2 13mm bolts that hold this EGR bracket on. We're gonna remove those and remove this bracket from the truck. Yoink. Now grab this back blocker plate. Make sure you tighten up this nut. You want that really snug. You don't want that coming out or falling into the engine or nothing like that, so tighten it up. Then we're just gonna put this blocker plate back over top of the gaskets and bolt it down with the existing hardware. All right, once that blocker plate is tight at the back, we are going to remove this exhaust manifold bolt. Now grab one of these things from the kit. Sometimes you need to use this nut, sometimes you don't. I'm just gonna try to thread this all the way in. And if this will bottom out and snug up to that exhaust manifold, then I don't need the nut. Okay, so see, I snugged it all the way, it bottomed out, and it didn't secure that exhaust manifold, so we're gonna have to put that nut on this one. And just like that, that's tight. I think these torque up to around 32 foot-pounds, but I don't know, just give it a good snug. Pop this heat shield off this exhaust back pressure sensor, and I usually just kind of bend it very gently a little bit like that, just so we can get that coolant hose in here. Then grab this new coolant nipple and put that O-ring on, and then I put a little bit of Vaseline on it just so it'll slide in better. And then you can pop it in here, and it should look flush like that when you're done. They can be very tight, but just put some lube on it and just give her a good push and maybe twist at the same time. You should get it in. Now you're gonna grab this bracket, and this part right here actually slides into this slot on that coolant nipple. As you can see, this one looks like it might have been damaged a little bit in shipping, so I'm just gonna use a hammer to straighten it out a little bit. A couple little taps with the hammer is all it took, and now it's nice and seated on there. Now you're gonna grab one of these bolts that comes with the kit, and it's gonna go back here, and you're gonna bolt it to this stud we put in. Then take these other bolt washer and nut, you're gonna put it in right here and kind of clamp this bracket to this coolant pipe right down there. Just like that. Now this bracket is very secure. Now we're gonna put the hose that connects from here to there. I usually just leave that O-ring on when I put this on, but if you want to remove it, you probably could. You should be fine. And just make sure you put this hose clamp on first before you put this hose on. I already have this side connected. Okay, we got this hose on. If you have the 68 RFE transmission and you have a dipstick, you're gonna use the nut and bolt and you're going to mount it to this bracket right there. But since we have the ASA and our dipstick is on that side, so we don't have to worry about that. Now we're going to get this hose, tuck it underneath this guy and hook it back up over there. This is how I ran it underneath there and then hooked it back up. And then I put this exhaust back pressure sensor plug that back in. And that's pretty much it. If you got a plug kit like me, you can plug off this sensor, this one here, and then you got these two right there. And then zip tie everything nice and neat out of the way. These are nice and they're all capped off. Now I'm just gonna zip tie them. So that should be it. Everything's zip tied neatly. Everything is tight. You can double check everything. But now we can move on to the exhaust. So just before we do the exhaust, I just wanted to say that these videos are totally free to watch, but if they help you out and if you want to support me a little bit extra, I do sell merch. I got hats here, we got cool shirts, we got hoodies, all that stuff. darkirondiesel.com. I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, if you really want to show your support, I'd love it if you grabbed a sweater or something like that. But anyways, let's move on to this exhaust. And if you don't have a lift like me, just put a couple ramps underneath both passenger tires and then just kind of drive the truck up like this, and it just gives you more room to work underneath. Okay, now for the exhaust. So first thing, I like to spray these hangers with some lubricant. Spray these bolts too. And then spray this V-band clamp up at the downpipe there at the front of the truck. The lubricant will just help it come apart better. So first thing I'm gonna do is loosen this nut here and this one here, and then I'm going to remove this tailpipe section of exhaust off the truck. You'll probably want to spray these exhaust hangers with some lubricant too, just to help them come apart better. For these rubber hangers, you can just use a pry bar and you can pry them off, or get yourself some of these exhaust hanger pliers. They work super good. All right, we got the tailpipe out. Now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna unplug this guy and that sensor up there. Now there's a bunch more sensors on top of this canister, as well as this DEF line and the sensor for it, but they're really hard to access right now. I'm actually gonna unbolt these 4 bolts and I'm gonna pull this back a little bit, and then I'm gonna kind of like rest it on my shoulder and then unplug it when I can kind of move it around more. If you're doing this off the ground, it's really easy. You can just kind of lay it on your chest and then you can unplug the rest of the sensors. Or if you have a buddy to help you, then just, you hold it back for them and they can unplug the sensors for you. Once you have all the sensors unplugged and you unclip everything, then you can remove that canister right from the truck. I actually tried something new and I left this exhaust hanger in a little bit, and then now this is hanging down lower, so I just unplugged this DEF injector. Here's the actual DEF hose. We're gonna undo that. If you look on the other side, you gotta unclip this connector. And then this one where it's got a yellow tab at the top and you have to pull it upwards with a pick and then it will shoot this guy off. For this DEF hose, I think you're supposed to be able just to push on that and then slide it off, but it never really works for me. So I usually just get a pick in here and I just kind of pop it out. Once you get that little clip out, you can just slide it back like so. Here's a better view of this back one. So if I put this pick in, Then kind of lift up like that. See that? And as you lift this up, this sensor is going to come off. Okay, and we got this chunk out. Now for this last piece, we're gonna get it loose before we unplug the sensors. So remove the two 13mm bolts that hold this bracket on, and this is just gonna come off with the filter when we pull it off. Spray this rubber hanger off and just pry it off, get it out of there. Again, with this one up here, spray this with some lube and pry it off. And then you're going to undo this V-band clamp and pull that bolt right out of it. This one is super easy to pry off with a pry bar. Okay, we are all loose. For this V-band clamp, sometimes it's good to use a pry bar and just kind of hit it with a hammer just to loosen it up and make it pop off like this. But now what we're gonna wanna do is just kind of slide it all the way this way, and that will give you much more room to unplug that guy, and then there's another one right here. Then if you come around to this side, you have that sensor up there to also unplug. And it is also hooked right here, so you'll have to kind of pop this off of that little heat shield. Once you have those three sensors disconnected, you can pull this filter out this way. Like I said, this is gonna come with it. You kind of just get underneath here and lift it up a little bit and just slowly push it out that way while you kind of twist it back and forth. These lines seem to get hooked on it all the time, so just kind of make sure they're free, and yeah, you can pull it out. And there it is out of the truck. So now I'm gonna take my plug kit and I'm just gonna cap off all the sensors we just unplugged, and then I'm gonna zip tie them all out of the way. Okay, these guys are all capped off, and then I just kind of zip tied these all up over there. So that's it. Now we are ready to start putting the new exhaust on, the final step. Also the most fun step, because y'all know it sounds good with an exhaust. So here is the exhaust. This truck's just getting a 4-inch. They just use this truck for hot shot towing, so they didn't need a big 5-inch or anything. So that's the first piece. This kit also has a little stainless steel muffler, which is nice. So yeah, this is the piece we're gonna start with right here. You have to put this hanger back on. Okay, so this is gonna be the hardest part of the exhaust install, and that is you have to butt this flange up with that flange, and then you kind of gotta spread this V-band clamp open a little bit, and then lock it around, like, you know, clamping these two together. Put the bolt and the nut back in, and then you don't have to tighten it all the way up right now, but just snug it up a little bit so that it's not gonna fall apart. All right, I moved it so the flange was at the bottom, so it's a little easier to work with, and I just have it snugged up. It's not super tight yet, but yeah, that is looking good. So I'm gonna go ahead and just keep throwing on parts of this exhaust. So this is pretty common with exhaust kits, but see, I need to get this muffler in there, but just the way this is, it's not going to fit. So I put this tailpipe section in place, and then I measured the distance I need, and I marked it right here. I'm actually going to be cutting off this beveled end because this end is beveled on the muffler. That other end is also beveled, so it's gonna slide right over this pipe, and then it's gonna slide right over this pipe. So that's what I'm gonna do. Just before you cut anything, just double check it, measure it twice, and then cut her up. These kits come for all configurations of trucks. So if you have like a short box to a long box to a crew cab, mega cab, all that stuff, it's gonna have enough exhaust to get you to the end. You just might have to cut some, that's it. All right, we got the exhaust all on. We haven't clamped it yet though. I made one cut here and it worked perfectly for the muffler, and we go all the way out the tailpipe. Some guys like to put these clamps on and like slide them on before they build the exhaust, but I always just take them apart and then I just build them around these seams. So however you do it, doesn't matter. Just make sure you put them back together the same way you take them apart. Once you have the clamps on, you can tighten them all up. Make sure you go up to that V-band clamp and make sure that's nice and snugged up. And then we'll start the truck and check it for exhaust leaks. Okay, we got this guy tight. We tightened 1 clamp, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this truck. You might only have 4 on yours, depends how long it is or not. This truck is a long box, so it might have an extra clamp. All right, we're gonna check for leaks. So just put your hands around all the clamps. Make sure none of them are leaking. If they are, you might have to readjust the clamp or tighten it up a little bit more. Okay, well, it's got no exhaust leaks, so all that's left to do now is go drive it. I'm gonna be doing a separate video for the review. I'm gonna review this kit on this high output 2022 6.7 Cummins. Again, the link for this kit will be down in the description. If they ever come out with a way where you don't have to swap the ECM, you bet your ass I'll be doing a new video on that as well. But for now, this is still the best way to do that. If you guys got any questions, shoot me a message on Instagram at darkirondiesel. Again, check out the merch. I love all your guys' support. Thank you for watching the video, and I hope to see you on another one soon.
I can't take no loss.